Also, I think as a woman in the workplace, as a young woman, I had to almost like pretend to not be a woman and not be feminine and just ignore that identity. And so all of a sudden I was like at a concert and I just like had somatic experiences. I was like, oh, I'm feeling the music in my body. I was like, there's information here. There's a gut feeling.
Carine Carmy, welcome to 20 Minute Leaders. How are you today?
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
No, the honor is mine and the pleasure is mine because I'm always excited to dive into a whole new industry and a whole new market that I know absolutely nothing about, but I want to know more about. Before we dive into what you're doing with Origin, I'd love to go back a little bit through UPenn, researcher, and you're getting your bachelor's degree there, and you go on to do all sorts of interesting stuff, whether it's with 3D printing or being a VP at Shapeways, instructor general assembly, VP sales at Amino, all sorts of different weird things. Take me a little bit through your journey up until Origin.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And, I think the common thread is just like follow your curiosity, right? Because you never know where the world is going to take you. But I grew up in LA and I went to school on the East Coast at Penn undergrad. And it was a really actually amazing experience. Loved it there. And I thought I was going to be a journalist. And then, after a lot of pressure from family and also, kind of seeing the business side, I was like, okay, this is actually very compelling. So studied econ and I graduated actually into the 2008 recession. So that was
Wow.
something special. And, definitely feel for everyone who's graduating this year amid COVID. I know it's, crazy, crazy times, but I was lucky enough to be able to get a job in management consulting. And this was 2008. Like the week before I joined, they let us know that they had let go, 20% of the firm. So I'm kind of like holding on to my chair, like, okay, what is this world going to be? And it was just an amazing boot camp. I think there's various ways you can start your career. I just feel really grateful to be in a position where my job literally every day was learn as much as I can as quickly as possible and like, provide the best advice we can using data and, analytics. And it was a good boot camp. But about a few years in, I started really developing my passion for technology and digital media. And I actually remember I saw this one video that came out of the MIT Media Lab, and it was called The Sixth Sense. And it was, the early days of AR, VR. And I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I have to work in tech. And I was like, I don't have any skills, but I got to work in this industry. And we had a digital media kind of consulting arm of Monitor called MarketSpace, and they were actually spinning out the practice into its own like kind of digital consulting studio. And so I kind of just knocked on their doors. It was three partners. I was like, you got to take me with you. I'm coming. So we started a boutique digital media firm called MarketspaceNext for a few years. And it was amazing. So, I went from like 50,000 feet to 10,000 feet. And we did everything from, like go to market strategies and UX design. And, you just kind of make it up as you go along. But it was a great learning experience. And both of my parents are small business owners. So I'd always thought about kind of doing the startup thing. And New York at the time, like the New York tech scene was, maybe 10,000 people. It was really small in 2009. The tech meetup was like the literal event that everyone would go to. And so I just started applying to jobs, and it took me about a year and a half to actually get someone to believe in me that, this person who had like no real operational skills, I basically, this is like the pro tip. I wrote a blog post about 3D printing because I thought it was a really interesting category. And then I sent it to the CEO of the company Shapeways, which was hiring for a head of marketing. And I just was like, I know it doesn't look like it on paper, but like, just take me. I promise you, it's not going to be a bad thing. And it was really one of the best career moves I was able to make. We were really small at the time. This is when 3D printing was just taken off. And I got to join the team really early days and help hope like just build this category. And it was so fun because, 3D printing is much bigger now, but at the time it was all of these like really passionate designers all around the world making products in ways that they've never been able to do before. So it felt like we were really democratizing manufacturing and creation. And I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes. I definitely had my like first office cry where I was like, I don't know how to do SEO. What does this mean? Like, I can't learn all of this like today. But it was an amazing experience. And I got to go from, first marketer to leading our marketing team. And then over time, building out our marketing community, e-commerce teams. And, felt really lucky to have people believe in me too, because, there's hard work, but you also have to have the right leadership to kind of sees you. So that was a good boot camp. Made a lot of mistakes, but it was really fun. And then I was thinking about moving to California. Kind of the pull from home kept pulling, and had always been interested in healthcare, and we had done a lot of healthcare work at Monitor and at MarketSpace. And this was when digital health has like kind of started to grow as a category, and you start to see more innovative direct to consumer and just innovative models in how we improve the healthcare system. And I decided to stop being skeptical and believe that like you could change healthcare. And so I joined an amazing founder, David Vivero, at a company called Amino, which is now one of the leading providers of kind of navigating the healthcare system and financial wellness around healthcare. Because like today, it's still, this, with healthcare in the US, it's crazy. Most people can't even afford a $500 surprise medical bill. And the difference between walking to like urgent care and ER is just insane. And there's no price transparency. There's no quality transparency. So we're really trying to tackle that. And go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I keep going back to this experience. It was my first week at Stanford. One of the economics professors that I had was talking about the fact that most Americans can't pay a $400 bill if their car breaks down in the middle of the street, which to me, it was unbelievable. It was unfathomable to imagine that the majority of U.S. families can't afford a $400 emergency. And what does that mean about a broken financial system where there's consumer spending on one hand, but lack of information and understanding about rational decision making. But sorry, that's my digression. Go ahead.
No, I'm with you, and we could have a whole conversation around equity in this country. And I think that's been, for me, one of the biggest kind of pull points, because at Amino and even with Shapeways, it's like you shouldn't have this asymmetric either power, information, or even financial tools. And even the same is true in women's health. But that reality of just how deeply uneducated most Americans, myself included, are about how healthcare works. Like, what is a deductible? It's we're kind of hiding, or the system hides behind these complicated words and systems, but it truly has a major impact on the livelihood of individuals, and that impacts their work. And you see now in COVID, so many people are afraid of losing their jobs, not just because of losing their jobs, but losing healthcare. And so like this whole system fundamentally needs to change. But politics aside, we were able to grow the team and the business a lot, and ultimately we pivoted from a direct to consumer company to B2B, and that's when I helped build out our sales team and kind of customer success. And as you could probably tell throughout my career, I was like, I want to do more, I want to learn more, and like I really loved seeing all aspects of the business. Like I love marketing, but for me that was just the entry point. So I'll never forget, a few years into Amino, the founder, David, took me to lunch. He's like, Carine, have you ever thought about being a CEO? And I was like, honestly, no, like I'd never put that on my radar. And just like that conversation opened up this possibility for me. And so I'm eternally grateful to David. He's honestly the best person I've worked with in my career. And it was that moment where, as we started moving to B2B, I'm not the best like enterprise sales leader in the country. Like the team and the company needed someone else. I was living between two cities, and we all decided it was best if I transitioned out. So I took some time off, which was the most terrifying thing I'd ever done, but I highly recommend it to anyone, in their kind of like early mid-career. If you don't know, it's really helpful to get that clarity. And I started working with a coach and just did like a lot of that personal exploration that, I had never stopped to do. Graduating at 21, I was like, go, go, go. And then I was like, wait, who am I? And what do I want to actually do with my life? And I think on a personal note, I felt this like, go ahead.
I really want to pause at that at that break and
Yeah.
the finding the time, because but I'm both feeling it myself, that this rush and this need to embrace every opportunity possible, especially given that
Yeah.
if we come with a place where we do have a privilege to have those opportunities, it's very hard for me to sleep an extra hour if I know that I could be meeting somebody like you and have a show like this. But talk to me a little bit
Yeah.
about this decision to take some time off, work with a coach, understand a little bit about yourself. How old were you, and what was actually going on during that time?
Yeah, so it was 2018. I'm 34 now, so a couple years ago, I was, like 32 or 31 at the time. And no, 32. Yeah, I'm like I can't do math. It's cool, whatever. Anyways, early 30s, and it was terrifying, honestly. So I got married. My husband was in LA. I was living in San Francisco. I flew back after the wedding and I had a breakdown in Shavasana in yoga. And I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, what is my life right now? And I, I'm like crying on the yoga mat. And the woman's like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine. Like, I can't, I just can't do it right now. And it, I loved the team at Origins at Amino so much. And I'd like, you orient your life around companies when you're in the startup world. And I think that's amazing, and I don't regret it, but I wasn't at that point the right fit for that role anymore. And I was like, okay, so now what? And so I had this moment where I said, like, I can either go jump into a new job, and like the money making person in me is like, okay, let's go do that. But I know that if I had gotten to that point where I was so misaligned with myself and my goals, like whatever I was going to do next, I was just going to be in the same place a few years later. Um, and so I called it, like, I needed a spiritual chiropractor. I was like, I need to just get back into alignment and figure out who am I and what do I value and how do I get my life to reflect that and not just get stuck on this pull. Because I think, especially in Silicon Valley or these big cities where there's a lot of very prominent models of success, you could just think
Mm-hmm.
that that's what it's supposed to look like for you.
Right.
And I think for a lot of people it's great, but let's ride our own train. We don't need to like get pulled by the examples that have been pulled before us. So I spent a lot of money on a coach. It was like terrifying. It was like I'm unemployed and I'm like spending thousands of dollars on working with this person. Best decision I made in my life.
Wow.
Like I actually met with her a couple of weeks ago around my birthday, and I was like, "Can you imagine?" Like we were sitting there with a whiteboard, and I was like, "I have no idea." Now I'm managing a 28-person team, like venture funded this whole thing. I'm like, "How is this? This is crazy." And in a space that's so important to me, but was like not even present at the time. So it took a lot of work, and I think for me, it was obviously very much around like, what do I value and how do I think about my criteria for what's next? But it was also about um, actually like the mental health sides of things. Because I think what was ultimately happening was I associated productivity and doing with success. And obviously you need to do to be successful, but like that's not the end state. And I had to unlearn that in a big way.
Wow.
So lots of, personal growth. And I think on also a really personal note, I don't know if this is particularly true to women, but it's been a theme in a lot of conversations I've had, is I was really disassociated from my body. I had worked so hard. I also, I think as a woman in the workplace, as a young woman, I had to almost like pretend to not be a woman and not be feminine and just ignore that identity. And so all of a sudden I was like at a concert and I just like had somatic experiences. I was like, oh, I'm feeling the music in my body. I was like, there's information here. There's a gut feeling. And I really reconnected with intuition and gut feeling and what that meant from a physical component, which then kind of was both very personal, but then got me so much more connected to what I'm doing today and realizing how many women, because of external pressures, have been taught to normalize pain or to normalize discomfort. And so, I was back in LA and I connected with a friend of mine from high school who had just had a baby. And, she was telling me everything she was going on in her body. And this happens to everyone, but like her abs were separated, her neck and shoulder were killing her. She was leaking. She couldn't control her bladder. She was having painful sex. And this is a woman of privilege who has some of the best insurance in the country. And that was her reality. And so, we started talking. She's a friend from high school, now my co-founder. And she basically Googled around in desperation and found a physical therapist and was dramatically healed. And we started just talking and we're like, wait, this is the standard of care in France. Like you get PT when you break your pinky, but not when you deliver a child through your vagina or through an invasive C-section. Like what's
Right.
wrong here? and why hasn't this taken off? And that really kicked off now the journey that is Origin.
Huh. So you're discovering this whole opportunity through sort of a
Yeah.
self-discovery experience, and it starts with
Yeah.
connecting the mind and body, but it's discovering that there's this whole, I don't know if it's taboo subject or if it's just, it's an industry that how do you identify that people aren't working on this? Because like you mentioned, now that you mention it, it seems so ridiculous that people are getting physical therapy when
Right.
when the slightest discomfort, but something like giving like childbirth, which obviously as a man I'll never understand the pain, but going something as traumatic to the body as it is, you don't really get that treatment. How do you explain that people aren't trying to solve it other than perhaps Origin?
I think there's a few things. So one, there's obviously a lot of gender bias in medicine, and it's systemic in this country. So like until the 90s, we were using men's bodies to study issues that only impacted women or primarily impacted women. So you could
Whoa.
actually do research on ovarian cancer in men, right? So like this is 90s, like 1990s. So we have just this deep systemic gender bias in medicine that's well
Wow.
documented, and it extends everything. It's women are less likely to have their pain taken seriously. They're more likely to, have heart attacks be misdiagnosed. Just end to end, women have had to become bigger advocates for their own care. So that's just messed up, but like that's the fundamental reality. I think we also have what was historically probably stigma or taboo subjects around pelvic health or vaginas, or like we would just associate anything pelvic oriented around either fertility or sex, which are things that are not often talked about in public discourse, although that's
Right.
changing. And then I think there's just structural reasons that hasn't happened before. So we're one of the only, and I can tell you a little bit what we do, but
Please.
most of the people who do what we do don't take insurance. And so, you think about like mainstream access really has to be affordable for this to take off.
Right.
And at our core, just to kind of level set, so Origin is providing physical therapy for women and mothers, and we are treating these incredibly common but often overlooked issues that impact women, often around pregnancy and postpartum, but like throughout our lives. So whether that's painful sex or you're an athlete and you're doing CrossFit and you can't control your bladder, all the way through menopause and you're having your muscles are weakening and you need more support. And PT is actually the first line treatment for all of these issues that women experience. But as we said, there's some supply side issues, there's some payer problems, and just the cultural norms. And I think what was really interesting for us is as we started digging into this early days, the investors weren't there yet too. So investors used to say fertility is women's health, and they'd be like, okay, but what about everything after fertility? Like, you have 50% of the population experiencing these issues. And because all the best companies at the time were in the fertility space, that's what like the market associated with women's health. And that was,
Mm.
even just 2 years ago. Today, I can't even tell you, it's like an explosion of creativity in women's health right now, everything
Wow.
from CPG and menopause and pregnancy. And it's very different. But a few years ago, that wasn't the case, and it's probably because there weren't as many women VCs, frankly, who were, you were
Really?
pitching to mainly men. Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. So talk to me a little bit more about this boom that you're experiencing, because until now it sounded like you almost stumbled upon this new market, a new opportunity that's obviously making a huge impact on women's lives, and
Yeah.
really an important space. But you're also talking about the fact that there is an explosion, not just that you're working on, but there's a lot of creativity in this space, and you're attributing a lot of it to female in VC positions where they're also interested in seeing these types of products. But is that the main reason you think?
I don't know if it's the main reason, but I think it's just like a perfect storm that was, kind of putting the blinders on. And then you also just have to think about this cultural cycle that we were in. So let's say you gave birth and then your body is a wreck. And then you go to your doctor 6 weeks later is the only touch point you have. And then you don't see your doctor for another year after that. No one is helping you feel better. And so that normalizes pain, right? And so every woman who's been through that cycle before is just taught that that's just the way it is. There's no real solution. Like, I'm going to have to pee my pants for the rest of my life, or sex is always going to hurt, or just bullshit, right? So, but like, if that's the psychology, then it's really hard to see and say, oh, like there's actually a real solution, without either saying something was wrong with me for not finding it, or like what's wrong with the medical system. I
Right.
think people are waking up to that in a big way. So I don't think it's just, VCs. You have Me Too. You have like so many trends that have shifted the conversation. And I think even culturally now, people are just far more open on Instagram about these issues themselves. So you're just seeing a lot of people, it's almost like an awakening, like, no, I'm not going to live with this anymore. And we have so many patients who are coming in, and it's just really intergenerational. Like someone is coming in, maybe postpartum, and they're bringing their younger sister. This has truly happened. They're bringing their younger sister who's an athlete, and their mom who's going through menopause. And it's like, no, none of us are going to go through this shit anymore. Because like, why would we?
I love that. I love that.
No, it's a revolution. Yeah.
It really sounds like that. Well, what are some, tips that you can think of in retrospect about identifying interesting market opportunities and these hidden markets that perhaps that today we either are not comfortable talking about, or they're just underserved in general.
Yeah, I wish there was like, here's the formula for for finding, new markets. I think it does require, obviously, just having some of your own intuition, expertise. But I think, part of it is, I always think about this framework. There's a lot of people talk about product market fit, but I think a
Right.
lot about product market capital fit. So you have to have both like the product that's serving the right people, but then also a way to fund that. And you see a
Of
lot of
course.
companies who are like, let's say, trying to go get VC capital that are not necessarily going to scale in that way, or just the conversation around how those three have come together, I think, have been missing the mark. But I would just say, there's some early signals on how industries are changing. So let's say, just looking at healthcare 1.0 around digital health was like, let's do what was happening in person and make it like better and digital. And that was One Medical, and all these other companies who just like brought it up to the consumer age. And now it's like, what is the real product, digital first solution that's going to actually be a game changer for the patient? And so I think you'll probably see similar cycles in other industries where first it's just about like, let's just make it better. And now it's actually, let's make it new and far more effective than we could have ever imagined.
I love that. Carine, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was inspiring and so interesting. And it sounds like what you're doing is really hugely impactful and has a positive impact on so many women. And I can't wait to see where Origin Physical Therapy grows and takes you. Before we end this, I want to ask you the most difficult question, which is 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
So it was a hard one. You gave me a little hint that this was going to happen, so I had a minute to think about it. But I think the 3 words would be creative, curious, and unstoppable.
I love that. Yes. Okay. Finally, I think this is the first episode in about 300 episodes where somebody said unstoppable, and I love that word. It's I love
we're
it.
just gonna go.
We're just gonna go.
Amazing. Well, I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I can't wait to share this with the world. Thank you.
Thank you.